What would happen if a CEO quietly returned to their own store and was kicked out by the staff? What would unfold next? Some mornings don't begin with coffee or a cheerful good morning text, but with a simple question that freezes the entire space for a moment. That morning, Elias Munro, the man who built the Red Ember fast food chain from scratch, walked into a newly opened suburban branch, carrying no business cards, no fancy car, no entourage. Just a faded grey hoodie, worn-out sneakers, and a quiet, weathered gaze. He stood at the end of the line, hands in his pockets, his thin frame unnoticed by anyone. Exactly what he wanted: to be invisible in the world he once created. When it was his turn, he stepped up to the cashier, smiled and asked, "Excuse me, is the chicken sandwich here freshly grilled or made and reheated?" The question was gentle, not sharp, not demanding. Yet it seemed to touch the fragile pride of the girl behind the register. Tasha, the name embroidered on her shirt, didn't answer immediately. She gave him a glare mixed with disdain and fatigue, then spoke loud enough for the people behind to hear. "If you want fresh food, go cook at home, sir." Those words weren't just a slap to Elias's pride, but a deadly blow to the values he had bled to build: respect, listening, and kindness. The line behind him paused for a second, then quickly returned to indifferent silence, as if what just happened was the everyday norm in a place where coldness had become the new normal. No one spoke up, no one objected. Before Elias could respond, a tall man, tattooed from head to toe, wearing Bluetooth earbuds, clearly the manager, stepped forward. "If you're not going to order, please step aside. You're blocking the line," he said evenly, without bothering to hear Elias's question. Elias turned and walked out silently. But his steps were unhurried. Through the thick glass, he looked up at the red and gold Red Ember sign, the logo he had personally sketched in a cramped garage 12 years ago. Back then, he had nothing but a marker and a dream that fast food didn't have to come with rudeness and carelessness. Yet now, after more than a decade, in the very child of his creation, Elias was treated like an unwelcome burden. And perhaps it wasn't because he was unrecognized, but because the culture he once ignited had truly been extinguished by someone no one cared to relight. This was no longer neglect. It was systemic forgetting. And today, Elias began his journey against the current, not to reclaim glory, but to see what, if anything, could still be saved, or if he had already lost everything without even knowing. Elias sat quietly in his car, without starting the engine. He watched the store through the windshield. The large windows reflected the pale morning light, but inside, the light seemed unable to penetrate the spirit of the people working there. A boy carrying a tray of food walked past the counter, greeted by no one, met with no smiles. A young mother with 2 small children fumbled to find seats while the staff merely glanced past as if they didn't see. Elias quietly wrote a line in his worn leather notebook. It's not that they forgot how to serve. They forgot why service matters. A soft sound caught Elias's attention. He rolled down the window just enough to clearly hear voices from behind the kitchen. "That old guy at table 4 again. Still asking about the fryer. Just tell him it's brand new, no need to check." A young man's voice, probably a kitchen assistant, spoke quickly before laughing. Another voice chimed in. "He's been here 3 days straight. Probably some undercover inspector." The laughter was sparse, tired, but unapologetic. Elias remained silent. He wasn't angry. No need to be. What weighed heavily on his heart wasn't the rumors, but the attitude of those involved: indifference, carelessness, and apathy. He once believed that even without him at the front line, the culture would continue, the system would keep its soul. But now, what he saw was a factory, emotionless, disconnected, where customers were barcodes and employees were machines running on endurance. Through the small kitchen window, Elias saw manager Jared leaning against the counter, chewing gum, phone in hand. Their eyes met briefly. Jared laughed, said something to someone nearby, then pointed at Elias as if he were a joke. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. Not out of anger, but out of disappointment. He wrote another line in his notebook: "What have I lost, the people or the spirit?" And he knew he wouldn't stop here. Elias left the parking lot as the crowd began to thin. No one saw him out. No farewells. But that didn't matter. He didn't need a send-off. What he needed was the truth about the very stores that bore his name. On the way back, Elias stopped at a gas station. He sat quietly in the car, took from the glove compartment a worn brown leather notebook, its spine cracked, the first page still bearing an old marker's imprint. Red ember, built on trust, sustained by kindness. It was a phrase he wrote in the first year, when he camped behind the kitchen and cleaned up trash every night himself. He flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Culture broken." He circled it twice. Then he paused, longer than usual. Outside the car window, a young man in a red ember uniform stepped out the side door. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it with trembling hands. A grease-stained napkin slipped from his pocket, fluttering in the light breeze. He bent to pick it up, glancing around, not out of fear of being caught smoking, but out of fear someone might ask, "Are you okay?" And he wouldn't know how to answer. Elias watched the young figure disappear through the side door. In that moment, he didn't see a reckless employee. He saw a lost soul. Just then, the delivery truck's horn blared. A large truck reversed close to the parking area behind the store, its rear wheels grinding over an oil slick. No one directed it. No staff stood outside to check the shipment. Elias observed as the driver unloaded the boxes alone, bumping them against the curb, causing some to topple. The driver cursed, wiped his brow, then bent down to pick up the wet cardboard boxes, sweat dripping onto the soaked paper. Inside, Jared remained seated, eyes glued to his phone, not looking up. Elias did not step out to help, not because he didn't care, but because he was observing this system from a place he had never stood before, the place of a voiceless man. He opened his notebook and wrote, "They are not bad. They are abandoned, and no one is turning back." The paper trembled lightly under his pen. The old question echoed in his mind. Is there still anything to save? Or did he lose it the moment he believed it could run on its own forever? At the next branch, Elias chose noon, the busiest time, to observe how the system operated under pressure. He picked a table near the service counter, ordering nothing but a chicken sandwich and a glass of water. The server this time, a young man, brought the tray silently, without greeting, eye contact, or a smile. Elias did not blame him. He just needed to listen. After a few minutes, from the slightly opened kitchen door, Elias heard whispers. "Table 6 is the old man from yesterday. Here again." The other voice replied, "Just tell him the food is fresh. Nod to everything he says. Just keep him quiet." What chilled Elias was not the words themselves, but the familiarity in the tone. Words spoken without hesitation or uncertainty, indicating they were repeated as part of a hidden routine. He didn't turn his head, only touched the table lightly, then took out a small recorder hidden in his jacket pocket. Not to accuse, but to keep evidence for himself. When Elias stood and passed by the counter, the manager, a man named Corey, laughed loudly with a group of employees, seemingly unaware someone was quietly walking past. Elias opened his notebook and wrote, "The truth is hidden. Customers are deceived. Employees learn to survive with lies." Then beneath that, he added a line not written in anger, but in sorrow. "It's not their fault. It's ours, those who stopped listening." 3 days later, Elias called a private meeting at the regional office. No email notification, no grand title. Just one invitation. Be there at 9 a.m., mandatory. The conference room had no slides, no presentations, only a small projector and a stack of paper files on the table. Elias entered last. No suit, no tie. Just himself, the founder of Red Ember, quiet but commanding. When Elias pressed play, the room fell silent. Voices echoed from the speaker. "Just say anything. Corporate won't check." Then, he asked about fresh fries. "Just nod." Another employee whispered, "As long as he gives 5 stars. A name was mentioned. Blake Mercer, the regional manager sitting in the back row, his hand still on his phone, but now clenched tightly. No one looked at him. No one smiled. Only the silence of people beginning to understand what was unfolding. Elias said little. He simply raised his hand and placed a phrase on the screen. What was Red Ember built on? Slowly, images appeared. Fake HR reports, hidden internal complaint emails, manipulated work schedules. Elias turned to look at everyone. "I'm not here to blame anyone today. I'm here to show you the true face of the system you run." All eyes turned to Blake. Elias didn't name him directly, but when Lauren, the regional deputy director, stepped forward and handed him a paper, Elias only nodded. "We're not firing a person," he said. "We're eliminating a leadership style. And if anyone chooses that style, you can leave starting today." Elias didn't return to the office after the meeting, nor did he send a summary email. He simply took his car and went, visiting each small branch scattered throughout the system, without notice, without titles. At a quiet store near a suburban gas station, he arrived right at lunch break and asked a young employee who was wiping the counter, "Do you have 5 minutes?" She hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. They sat in a corner of the dining area where the sound of the fryer couldn't drown out honest words. Elias didn't ask about procedures or KPIs. He simply asked, "What's the hardest part of this job that no one has ever asked you about?" The girl, named Ivy on her badge, lowered her head, her voice barely audible, as if afraid even she could hear herself. "Feeling replaced, even though I give my best." Elias nodded, writing down every word without altering it. Then he asked again, "If you could change one thing?" "Respect," Ivy answered immediately. No hesitation this time. We don't need praise, just someone willing to listen. Elias said nothing more, closed his notebook, and gave a slight nod. That evening he sat in his car in front of the old store, the notebook resting on the steering wheel, beside a small folded note slipped into his jacket pocket by someone. 3 handwritten words. We're still here. No signature, no explanation needed. Elias held the note, neither smiling nor crying. But inside, something quietly ignited. He opened a new page in the notebook and wrote, "Rebuild, not for them, with them." He circled the phrase heavily, as if it were the first declaration for a battle he would never abandon. Not to save a brand, but to save something greater: trust. Change never begins with a notice taped to the door or slogans printed on food containers. It starts in the small moments when a shift leader bends down to pick up trash instead of ordering someone else. When a cashier smiles to greet a customer, even if it's just for a glass of water. Or when a dishwasher quietly asks a colleague, "Are you okay?" without expecting an answer. Elias saw all of this in the following days. He didn't come to inspect, didn't need to record or hold meetings. He just sat quietly in a corner, notebook in hand, silently observing. And then the notes began to change. No longer. No one greets customers. Manager ignores staff. Kitchen is dirty. But instead, staff clean the floor without being asked. Someone apologizes to a customer for a late dish. Chef praises shift leader in front of the team. These lines to Elias were more valuable than any revenue report. At a small store outside the city, he found a folded note quietly placed on a food tray. "We see you." No signature, no one waiting for a response. Elias kept the note as a keepsake, not because it moved him, but because it confirmed something he once feared lost. They still had faith in him, and in what Red Ember stood for. That evening, Elias wrote nothing more in his notebook. He simply flipped back to an old page, reread the 3 words he had written: broken culture. Then beside it, he added a new line: and it can be mended if we start with the right people. That morning, Elias returned to where it all began, the very first store, the place where he was once asked to leave just for asking a simple question about the food. A light rain fell, and no one recognized him as he stepped inside. But then Tasha's eyes, the same cashier from back then, lingered on him for a moment. She looked at him for a second, then quietly lowered her head and said, "Hello." Just 2 words, yet so different from before. Elias said nothing, simply sat down at a table, ordered a simple meal, and waited until lunch break. When Tasha came outside, he invited her to sit beside him on the stone bench, still warm from the rain and lingering body heat. She looked down, hands intertwined. "I thought I was fired," Tasha said softly, as if speaking to her own memory. Elias shook his head, his gaze drifting toward the rain, fogged sign outside. "You're still here, and today you greeted the customers." He paused, then gently added, "For me, that's enough." Tasha didn't respond immediately, but her eyes no longer avoided his. She didn't need to justify or excuse herself. The silence between them was not heavy, but full of sincerity. Elias didn't come to revisit old mistakes. He came to confirm one thing. When people are given a chance, will they choose to change? And today, the answer was yes. They sat together for a few more minutes, speaking little, sharing 2 warm paper cups of coffee in the chilly morning air. When Elias stood to leave, he didn't look back. There was no need, because what he needed to see, he had already seen. Not a cleaner store or more energetic staff, but the eyes of a person once lost, now brave enough to start again. And to Elias, that was worth more than any overhaul. No press conferences or charts were needed. The change at Red Ember spread through small conversations, plastic chairs in the break room corners, and the hot coffee Elias brought every time he visited. He no longer asked about sales or quarterly performance, but quietly asked each person, "What do you find here that's worth staying for?" Some answered their co-workers. Some mentioned regular customers or the sauce they prepared by hand every morning. But others just shrugged and smiled weakly. Maybe because there's still someone who cares. Elias said nothing more, just opened his notebook and took notes. The entries grew longer. The former manager apologized to the night shift team for a harsh attitude. A new chef was nominated team leader, thanks to dedication. Someone came back to work after 3 months off because the environment has changed. One day at a store near the highway, Elias saw the young cashier who had ignored him during his first visit. This time, the cashier smiled first. "You're back for real?" Elias nodded. "How do you find it now?" "Probably less sad," he replied, hesitating slightly. "After that day we sat down and talked. Not a meeting, just the first time we really listened to each other." Elias didn't take notes then, but later in his car, he opened his notebook and wrote a single word: transformation. Because what Elias wanted most was not a perfect system, but a team that knew they still had a chance to start over, not out of fear of punishment, but because they believed they deserved to be heard and to fix mistakes together. And when that begins, everything else naturally falls into place. That afternoon, Elias returned to the place that once unsettled him the most, and also the place that inspired the start of his quiet journey, the very first Red Ember store, where everything had once cracked under the weight of a single scornful question. The sky was clear, sunlight gently slanting down on the weathered brick wall, the peeling sign hanging silently above the entrance. No one inside recognized him as he pushed open the door. But that no longer bothered him. He wasn't there to be acknowledged. He was there to see if he still had a reason to believe in what he had built over more than a decade. Elias chose an old table by the window, the very spot where he had once been pointed at and mocked. But this time, no strange eyes, no whispers behind his back. A new employee approached, offering a menu with a gentle smile. "Hello, I'm Arya. What would you like today?" Her voice was soft, unhurried, sincere. Elias ordered his usual, a grilled chicken burger, fries, and water. As Arya turned away, he looked around. The space remained as he had designed years ago. Light wooden floors, pale red walls, simple tables and chairs. But the atmosphere had changed. He saw a group of young staff cleaning the kitchen counter together, no orders given. A waitress helped an elderly customer carry a tray, and a manager, much younger than Elias had imagined, knelt to help a little girl who had dropped her spoon, not forgetting to say thank you. This was not the sign of a perfect system, but it was the clearest proof of what Elias had hoped for from the beginning. Culture does not die, as long as it is rekindled at the right moment. When the food arrived, Elias looked at the plate before him. The burger was still warm, the vegetables fresh, the chicken evenly grilled, not fancy, but clearly made with care. He ate slowly, every bite steady, not to test quality, but to feel something that had once been lost. The feeling of being served with genuine kindness, not routine. A boy at the next table knocked over his glass, and before his mother could react, Arya was already there with a napkin and a friendly smile. No one blamed him. No one was annoyed. A few months ago, this might have been ignored or handled with a sharp reminder. Now it was met with natural empathy. No instructions needed. After finishing, Elias took his tray to the counter, like any other customer. The cashier looked at him and asked, "Would you like to leave a review?" Elias hesitated, then picked up a pen, looked at the blank comment box, and wrote slowly, "Always choose care over speed." The cashier read it, smiled, and nodded. No further questions, no explanations needed. Elias left the store with light steps. The afternoon breeze brushed gently through the awning, carrying the smell of fries and the laughter of children from inside. He didn't need to open his notebook or write any more notes, because for the first time in years, he knew this work, this mission, was no longer resting solely on his shoulders. It had returned to where it should have belonged from the start. Ordinary people quietly keeping the flame alive every day without being told. And that was the most beautiful ending he had ever hoped for. Not to close a chapter, but to begin. In business, many believe that building a good enough system means it will run smoothly forever. But the reality shows us that culture is not programmed once and for all. It must be nurtured every day through the smallest actions, a thank you, a listening gaze, a choice between speed and care. Elias Monroe's story is not a lesson in leadership from above, but a reminder that sometimes leaders need to step down, sit beside those who quietly keep the rhythm, and ask a simple question: how are you feeling? It is from the most honest answers that transformation begins, not from boardrooms, but from kitchens, dining tables, and break rooms. If you believe a business is measured not just by revenue, but by how it treats its people, please, like this video, subscribe to the channel to never miss stories that touch the heart from within the system. And don't forget to leave a comment with the phrase, "Keep the flame alive." If you also believe that sustainable change does not come from orders, but from trust rekindled at the right moment, thank you for following this journey to the end. The story may be over, but the revival of culture has only just begun.